What's up, Grace Life Church? Man, oh man. Quickly, before we get started this morning, we have been, if you've been giving over the last year, check your email because your giving statements should be there. Okay? Okay? All right. Man, I before I get started, I just got to say how much I appreciate y'all's continued faithfulness in your giving. There is a supernatural thing involved in your giving, but there's also a practical part of your giving. And this church, many churches, every church has taken a big hit over this last year, but we've been able to keep on keeping on. Numbers have gone down, just like every other church, but I'm telling you, we're going somewhere, and it could have been real easy to get discouraged this year when we look out and see things kind of dip, but y'all's faithfulness in giving has just been, I don't even know what to say about it. I'm grateful for it, and we're going somewhere, all right? I'm not good with stuff like that, so let's just get into let's get in the message. We are continuing our series on Joseph called Dare to Dream. And I was thinking about this I think this is the fourth or fifth week that I've been talking about Joseph, and every week I've summarized the entire story up to this point. I can't keep doing that, folks. And some of y'all are probably, I get it, all right. So if you've been here for the series, great. If you haven't, go to gracelifeonline.com and catch up because it's been really good. But each individual, the way I'm doing these messages, whether you've been listening this whole time or not, each message has its individual thing. Man, I got to get my stuff together. All right. So fear not, you're all right. If you haven't been keeping up or you've been sleeping or not paying attention, whatever it may be, we'll be all right. It would be a lot cooler if you did go and listen to it. All right, so the story of Joseph continues with Joseph sitting at the bottom of a pit. And we're just barely going to get Joseph out of the pit this morning, so we're not going too far in this story. I told you this series is going to be a long one. It's going to be good, all right? His hateful brothers threw him down there, and now they're trying to decide what to do with him. And we're just going to continue reading just a few verses into this story. It's in Genesis 37, starting in verse 25. They're trying to figure out what to do. It says they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming for Gilead with their camels bearing spices, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he's our brother." Suddenly he's having this moment where he cares. Throw him in a pit, conspire to kill him. Now he's like, come on, folks, this is our brother. It's funny to me. All right, so he's our brother and our flesh, and his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. That's as far into the story as we're going to get this morning because there's a few things I want to point out. Now, last week we talked about how we need to prepare for the pits because pit happens. It's going to happen whether you get it or not, pit happens in your life. We live in a world where bad things happen to us. And it's not something that we always want to talk about, especially as faith people. We're believing God. Faith is an expectation, a positive expectation of eternal salvation, meaning we shouldn't just hope for good things to happen to us. We should expect them because we're children of God. And we talk about that stuff all the time, but if we neglect the fact that bad things are going to happen to us, we're missing it, and we're going to be in a bad spot when bad things do happen. Because yes, you are loved. Yes, you have the power of God on the inside of you. Yes, you have favor. And yes, we should expect good things to happen to us as children of God, but we can't be unprepared for life's curveballs. You can't. I mean, so when I talk about prepare for the pits, I'm not saying have a Murphy's Law mentality where what can go wrong will go wrong, and we start to expect bad things to happen because we live in a fallen world. But there are certain things that we can do to prepare ourselves for those things. I think we need to prepare for success, that we need to prepare our lives and situate our circumstances to prepare ourselves to receive the things that we've been praying for. Some of us have been praying and believing God for some things for a long time, but we haven't set ourselves up to receive it. With poor stewardship or lack of situating ourselves or positioning ourselves to receive. I remember when I was a youth pastor up in Colorado, Laura and I, we had about eight teenagers in our youth group at that time, and we would set out about 10 chairs. And one day I said, you know what? We're believing for this thing to grow, but we're not prepared. So one day I got there a little bit early and I set out 35 chairs. And one of the teenagers showed up a little bit early and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're believing for growth. What if 35 showed up tonight? We would be in trouble." So he helped me set up the chairs, and that night about 8-10 kids showed up, and it looked kind of silly. But then the next week 30 showed up. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. But it's one thing to believe for something and know the power that you possess, but whenever you start to prepare and actually situate your life a certain way, that's when God can actually get the things to you. We've said we've had to put some in this church. We've implemented things in this church where right now it seems a church your size. What are you doing? Why do you have 50 people working in children's church right now? Because we're preparing for growth. Because if we're not, and suddenly 200 people show up, we would be in trouble. So we're preparing for the future. We're preparing for the things we're believing God for. So whenever I say prepare for the pits, I'm not saying to expect bad things to happen. But as you start to shift your life and you start to go against the stream, you're going upstream when everyone's going downstream, you're going to bump into things every now and then. Things are going to knock you around. I used to think that whenever I started to turn my life around and live for God, nothing bad would ever happen to me because I have this hedge of protection. Brother, I got a hedge of protection. Nothing bad's ever going to happen to me. And then bad stuff happened to me, and I didn't know what to do. And what happens whenever we have that mentality is bad stuff happens, and we start questioning God. Is he trying to teach me something? Is he punishing me because I've messed up? Or we start to go down all these really unhealthy paths. But when we're going against the stream, when we start to do something, there's a target on us at that point. We're no longer fitting the mold of society. And so we're set apart. People start to look at us differently. So now, rather than looking at bad things when they happen to me as I'm doing something wrong, I say, I must be doing something right. Y'all are like, I don't want that. Life is going to throw curveballs at you. Sometimes you're speaking life and success over yourself, and it just doesn't go the way you expected. Global pandemics happen. Stuff happens. Pit happens. Sometimes you're speaking life and success over your Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship. You wear a cheese hat in front of your church. You get called names, but you don't care. You don't care because you are a fan of the Green Bay Packers. You're speaking life success, and then they kick a field goal on 4th and goal when they have Aaron Rodgers, the NFL MVP, and they lose the season, and you've been speaking. We're getting personal. I'm getting sweaty. Man, bad things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. When your wife's football team is in the Super Bowl and yours isn't, bad things happen. She has more faith than me. You're right. So, again, I'll say it over and over because we can get confused and we can think that I'm telling you that I'm contradicting what we typically say, and I'm not at all. We have to prepare ourselves for the pits. Bad things will happen. You might think, surely you can't be serious. And I am serious. Don't call me Shirley. Got one laugh. That's Airplane. Y'all seen Airplane? Y'all just don't think it's funny. All right. I'm not telling you to be negative or shape your life in fear of bad things happening, but we can prepare ourselves to take on anything that life throws at us. How do you prepare? That's what we talked about last week. I'm just going to fly through them. Relationship with God, relationship with yourself, and relationship with others. When you build up those three areas of your life, it doesn't matter what happens to you, you can keep on keeping on. So how you respond to the pits will reveal if you've really prepared yourself. So you look at yourself. What comes out of you when you get squeezed? Because it's easy when things are going well to just have a good attitude and have a high expectation on life. That's easy. But what happens when you get squeezed? What happens when things don't go your way? Some things come out and it's just nasty. Fear, desperation, stress, anxiety, guilt, anger, resentment, offense. We want to believe that we have it all together, but what happens when you get squeezed? What happens when you leave church and you go out to eat with all your friends and you have bad service at the restaurant? It's like, forgot. What did he talk about again? I don't know. We've been there. We went to, I won't name the restaurant, but a while back, a bunch of us went out to eat at a restaurant here, and it was horrible service. And that stuff used to get under my skin. And now I acknowledge it. I'm like, boy, this person's having a bad day. But it gets those things, those little petty things in life just become laughable whenever you are built up and you're prepared for things. And that's just a silly thing. But what happens when the layoffs start happening? What happens when the big things in life really happen? If you can't prepare yourself for bad service at a restaurant or a traffic jam, how are you going to handle it when real pits happen? So Joseph, he's at the bottom of this pit, and I believe that he responded in a certain way because that's how you know. Again, you want to know what you really believe, what comes out when you get squeezed. And in this story of Joseph, it talks about his brother Judah. And in the Bible, names are important. They have deeper meanings behind them. In Genesis 37:26, it talks about his brother Judah. And that word Judah means praise. The word Judah, the name Judah, means praise. So, praise was responsible for getting Joseph out of the pit. I believe Joseph found himself at the bottom of a pit but had an attitude of praise, and that's what got him out. Now, praise, we throw these little Christian words around. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, that praise word. Just little words just kind of used to rub me the wrong way. That sure is a churchy word, and it's kind of silly to think that way, but that's how I used to be. Like, oh, this makes me uncomfortable. Because when I think of praise, I think of like dancing and worship, and that's not my personality. Some of you, that's your personality, and that's great. You do you, but it's not mine. So whenever I used to think of praise, it was kind of a more demonstrative, that's how you say that word, demonstrative way of living. And there is an element of truth to that, but it doesn't have to be this hyper-spiritual, goofy thing. If you're into the hyper-spiritual, goofy thing, that's cool. It's just not me. But all praise is an expression of approval or admiration for someone or something. And so, as I said, a relationship with God at its most basic level is just an acknowledgement of His presence every moment of your life. He's with you every moment of your life. He's with you at the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. He's not here today, gone tomorrow. He's not afraid of your sin. He's not afraid of the bad things that you've created in your life. And whenever we think that God's mad at us because we've messed up, even intentional mess-ups, when we think that He's going to punish us or withhold His blessings from us or whatever we've come up with in our minds, these religious ways of thinking, we start to avoid Him. And we leave We separate ourselves from the one person that we need more than ever in those dark moments at the bottom of the pit. Praise does three things. It prepares, pardons, and positions. Praise prepares us for pits. Praise pardons us from the pits. In other words, it rescues us from the pits. And praise positions us to receive. So God isn't just in the business of meeting your needs or just forgiving you or just getting you out of the pit, putting you at ground zero, and then it's up to you to really build from there. No, he is a God of abundance. He came to give us life and life more abundantly. He's given us an abundance of grace. God is an abundant God. I hear it all the time that God just wants to meet our needs. He doesn't want to just meet your needs. I don't just want to meet my kids' needs. I'm not just providing them a roof over their head and food to eat. No, they have stuff that causes them to enjoy life a little bit, a lot of bit, too much sometimes. That's how a father treats his children. We're not just feeding them and clothing them, but we're giving them the things that they actually want. And we encourage them to pursue the things that they're passionate about. That's how a father is. So God doesn't just want to rescue you from the pit. He wants you to live an abundant, supernatural life. Praise will make the pits seem like a minor inconvenience. So this stuff still happens to you, but your response to it starts to change. I watched this on YouTube. I spend way too much time on the YouTubes. But there's this guy, Ryan George is his name, and he does these things called pitch meetings. Has anyone watched pitch meetings on YouTube? I sent them to you, so I know you have. They're hilarious, and all he does, he edits these videos together in a really funny way, and he's talking to himself. So he's a movie production guy, and then there's another guy that he's also playing the part of, and he's pitching these movie ideas to him, and he uses real movies. And what he does in those is he points out all the goofiness in movies that we don't even think about while we're watching the movies. And for example, he'll say, I don't know, Star Wars. There's battle droids, and they're supposed to be the toughest of the tough, and they're cornering the Jedi. If y'all haven't watched Star Wars, this isn't a spoiler, but my gosh, it's been like forever. But there's these battle droids. There's no way anyone could beat the battle droids. And he says, man, it must have been really tough for him to get out of this situation. And the response has become a thing that he says in every one of his videos. He says, no, it's super easy. Barely an inconvenience. And because the movie has to take place. I mean, the battle droids can't kill the good guy, so they have to somehow get out of it. And it just becomes super easy, barely an inconvenience. And that's what happens whenever we have a lifestyle of praise. The bad stuff happens, and it seems like there's no way out, but it becomes super easy, barely an inconvenience. It would be a lot funnier if y'all had seen those videos, but I tried my best to summarize it. But that's what happens. Life is going to knock you around sometimes, but you can still come out ahead. In Acts 16, Paul and Silas are preaching the gospel. They're out preaching the gospel, healing the sick, seeing all sorts of signs and wonders, doing the thing that God called them to do. And wouldn't you know it, they ended up in prison, doing the thing they were called to do. The story, I'm going to jump kind of in the middle of this story, but it's Acts 16, verse 22. The multitude rose up against them, and the magistrates, that's the military leaders, tore off their clothes and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And when they had laid many stripes on them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to keep them securely. Having received such a charge, he put them in the inner prison and fastened their feet in stocks. You could say they were thrown in a pit. Verse 25, but at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. The prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that, the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's chains were loosed. And the keeper of the prison, awakening from sleep and seeing the prison doors open, supposing the prisoners had fled, drew his sword and was about to kill himself. But Paul called with a loud voice, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." Man, there's a lot here, and I actually had to cut this story short because there's so much in this story. But again, the very thing that Paul and Silas were called by God to do is what ended them up in prison. So we can't have this mentality that just because I'm stepping into this new life and this new purpose and have this relationship with God, that nothing bad's ever going to happen. But it didn't affect them the way that it would other people. In fact, they were sitting there praising and worshiping God in the middle of a pit. And they weren't just praising God so they could get out of prison. They stayed in prison. The doors of the prison opened and they didn't leave because they were still so caught up in this experience with God, in worship, in praise. And the situation was the same. They were still in the deepest, darkest parts of that prison, and they were just praising and worshiping God in the middle of that. They weren't using praise as a tool to get what they wanted. They had a lifestyle of praise. And so no matter if it was really good or really bad, that's just how they lived life. Now, praise can be a tool to get you out of a situation. Sometimes when life is hard, you need to make yourself, you need to speak to your soul, like Psalms 103. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Forget not all his benefits. Everything that's within me, bless the Lord. We got to tell ourselves to do those things sometimes. And that's okay because praise can be used as a tool. But what if praise and worship wasn't a music style, but it was a lifestyle? What if we started every day? And again, that means different things to different people. For some of you, it does mean turn on some music and just get in God's presence and just soak it in. Some of you, it just means acknowledging him and talking to him. It means different things. You have to figure that out for yourself. Because each one of us have a relationship with God that looks different than the person sitting next to us. And that's okay. So I can't tell you what your idea of praise looks like, but you have to find that for yourself and get in there. Not just when things are bad, not just when your back's against the wall and you use it as a tool to get out of your situation, but all the time. All the time. Praise shouldn't be the caboose that follows you. It should be the steam engine that pulls you through. Man, tweet that one. Write that down. Psalm 34:1 says, "I will bless the Lord at all times. All times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth." I've noticed this, and I fall into it, so it is what it is. This is just human nature, I think. But whenever things aren't going that well in our lives, that's when we draw near. You lost your job. You don't have any money. Your dog bit you. Your wife left. Your truck broke down. The country song. And I gotta get right with God. I gotta get right with God. I'm going to church. I'm going to church, and I'm going to draw near and really start to grow in these things. Now, let me just clarify. This right here is not your relationship with God, but this is a supplement to your relationship with God. So we need it, but it's not limited to this. It's like protein shake. Anyway, I won't go there. Our back's against the wall, all this stuff's going wrong, and we say, I'm going to church. And we go to church, and you listen to probably the best preacher you've ever heard in your life. And that is so far from the case. I've been going back and listening to old messages. I'm so thankful y'all are still here. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Anyway, we show up, and if anything, we find some nuggets in the middle of the mess, and we say, wow, God is awesome. He's not holding my sins against me. He has called me to something great. I'm made on purpose for a purpose. I'm righteous and holy. I'm not trying to become these things. I am these things. It's on the inside of me. I'm not the sick trying to get healed. I'm the healed fighting off sickness. I am already victorious right here where I sit. And I start to see myself differently because I'm in an environment where that is encouraged. I start to see God differently because I'm in an environment where that's encouraged. So life starts to get better. Things start to turn. The prison doors open. I get pulled up out of the pit. And then we take our foot off the pedal because it's not this necessity right at that moment. I'm telling you, that stuff works. Praise works. Praise can be a tool to get you out of prison. It can be a tool to get you out of the pit. When I say prison, that's a metaphor. I mean, if you murdered some people, you probably sit in prison for a while. So understand what I'm saying. It's just an example here. But it works. I've seen people in prison that are freer than a lot of people that are out here because they've gotten a hold of this. They've gotten a hold of this relationship, and they're just set free from this condemnation and guilt. There's still natural repercussions for your actions, but you don't have to beat yourself up anymore because God's not beating you up. He's not beating you up. So we get it. We show up. We praise. We worship. We go, and everything starts to work its way out. And we stop showing up, and things start to close in on us again. The walls of the pit start to fall in. So if we just maintained an attitude, a lifestyle of praise, that would be a preventative measure. It would prevent you, not from the pit, but it would cause you to respond to the pits differently, and you would step right out of them. It'd be super easy, barely an inconvenience. Whenever our son, Wes, was in the hospital, it's been, how long? A couple years almost? Many of you know the story, but he had pneumonia. He woke up. He had this little cold, and sometimes your kids just whine, especially males. We whine when we don't feel good. And he was coughing and this stuff, and we said, you know what, just go to bed. He said, my chest hurts. And I said, suck it up, Buttercup. We all hurt. Get over it. And so he went to bed, and he was just crying. And I thought maybe he had this cough, and maybe his chest was just sore, or maybe he pulled something or whatever. And the next morning, we took him in, and turned out it was pneumonia. They took an x-ray, and one lung was completely filled with fluid. Talk about feeling like a complete horrible father, my gosh, because here I am telling him to suck it up, and he's got a legit thing going on. And we're speaking, we're praying, we're believing. We believe this stuff. We are faith people. We know this stuff. We're built up in this stuff. But life happens sometimes. And so he got admitted to the hospital. He had to get a chest tube, and he was unconscious for a few days. And for about 3 days, we had no idea if our son, who was 7, I think, at the time, if he was going to survive. Every day, we just had no idea. By far, the worst thing that's ever happened to either of us in our life. And we've been through some stuff. And our response to that pit was we closed ourselves off. Knowing all the stuff that I'm telling you today, we closed ourselves off from everybody. Very few people knew what was really going on. And we just sat in that hospital room in our misery with our son on death's doorstep. And it got to be a Saturday. It was Easter Sunday, so almost 2 years ago. Easter Sunday, and we had somebody else come speak for us, and I had to tell our church what was going on. I was forced to let people in at that moment. I didn't want to, but I had to, because I couldn't. On Easter Sunday, I had to tell y'all if I was going to be here or not and explain the situation. And in that moment, and to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm that private of a person. Maybe I am more than I think, but I can tend to have a negative, how do you say it? I think people have ill intentions when they don't, however you would say that. So I thought, these people, I'm not going to tell them. They're just nosy. They just want to know what's going on in our life. It's none of their business. This is personal. Leave me alone. And when I was forced to let people in, it was the complete opposite. People started praying and speaking life over our son. They started speaking peace over me and Laura. And wouldn't you know it, that very day, things started to turn around. We started to let people in to help us praise God when we didn't have it in ourselves to do it. And the tide started to turn. The ship started to redirect. And we saw a miracle. You could say, well, why, if you believe all this stuff, why did he ever get sick in the first place? And I could give you a bunch of reasons, but the reality is, we're going to experience pain in this world. In this world, you will have trials. You will have tribulations. But, Jesus says, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. I have deprived it of power to harm you. You're going to face some stuff. And that's why I say relationship with God, relationship with yourself, see yourself the way that God sees you, but also relationship with others who will pull you up out of the pit when you can't pull yourself up. We're not meant to live life alone. We can use praise as a tool, or we can have a lifestyle of praise, a lifestyle of worship. And that's when real breakthrough happens. Going back to that story, the verse 26, suddenly there was a great earthquake, so the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were open and everyone's chains were loose. Not just Paul and Silas's, not just the ones doing the praising and the worshiping, but even the people they surrounded themselves with benefited from their attitude of praise, their lifestyle of praise. People around you will start to benefit. It's similar to whenever Peter is out and the disciples are out and they've been fishing all night, and Jesus says, go back out there. They hadn't caught anything. Go back out there and let down your nets again. And when they did it the way that Jesus told them to do it, they brought in all the fish. And so much fish that their boat started to sink. And not just theirs, but the partners around them, their boats started to sink as well. When you live this lifestyle, you will become an advertisement for the kingdom. It says that they were praying and singing hymns, and the prisoners were listening to them. They must have thought they were out of their minds. People are going to think you're out of your mind. They're going to think you're delusional. They're going to say, you have every right to be depressed. You have every right to be anxious. You have every right to be fearful right now. But the peace of God surpasses all understanding. It's going to make you look delusional at times. But I'd much rather be in that spot and look like a goofball to the world around me than live in the pit where most people are and where most people feel like they can never get out of it. Don't wait for the pit to start praising. Start now. Start now. Give thanks to God for who He is. Sing songs. Talk to Him. Spend intentional time with Him every single day. Not as an afterthought. Not while you're doing something else. Not while you're looking at your phone and kind of involving God in your life. Not even while you're driving down the street. Yes, do all that. But have it could be 5 minutes every day of an intentional time. Me and Laura have to have intentional time together if we want our marriage to thrive. And there's been times where we didn't, and it started to dip. So we know now, every single day, we spend intentional time together. We have to do it. And if that's true about my marriage with my wife, it's true about your relationship with God as well. When you do that and pit happens, it'll be super easy, barely an inconvenience. Amen? All right, Father, thank you so much for your goodness, your grace, your love. And I just speak that over everyone this morning, that they remember that as they go about their life, as they start to see, or when they start to experience things, they keep you at the forefront of their mind, knowing that you're good and you want them out of the pit. You're so good that you've already provided a way out. We just have to get our thinking aligned with yours. And that's when everything starts to change. So, Lord, I just thank you for, your grace, your power, your righteousness that's already on the inside of us. These aren't things that we need to try to attain. It's things that are already in our possession, and we can use it. And that's what we're all going to do. And we just thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Awesome. Before we have this last song, we want to receive our offering. Again, I'm so thankful on the practical side of things. I'm thankful for your commitment and faithfulness in your giving to Grace Life Church. But I also believe that as we give, we link arms together, and as we all prosper, it will start to overflow in other areas of our life. You're a part of every life that we touch, and it might not always look like we're doing a lot right here, but we're reaching people out there. I'm telling you, I hear it all the time. So we couldn't do it without your faithfulness. So if you'd like to give this morning, you can give by cash or checks written to Grace Life Church. Just drop them in the offering box at the back of the room. Also online at gracelifeonline.com. And be looking for your giving records in your email. Check your junk, spam, all that stuff, just in case. If you need prayer this morning, we have some awesome people in the back of the room. But for now, let's all stand up and worship together.